Hey there, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music, welcome. In my last video, I speculated on why FabFilter hasn't embraced AI yet and may never. If you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link to it somewhere up here. Now, the comments on that piece were really interesting, and I'm truly grateful to everyone who joined the discussion about AI and its place in music production. There were two comments, though, that stood out to me, and I want to highlight them as they tie in neatly to the topic of today's video. Now, the first comment is from 7 Level Beats, and they said, FabFilter might be avoiding AI for two reasons. AI tools have achieved things in audio restoration that weren't possible with traditional tools. For example, many in the music world have embraced AI stem separation tools. And also, restoration is generally seen as a technical task and not a creative or fun one. Let's break this comment down before we move on to the next one. So the first point about AI and restoration is, I think, valid. In audio, restoration, just so you know, is like using Photoshop on a recording. You're cleaning up pops and clicks and static and buzz. This is a space where AI has made significant strides, and I agree with this part of the comment. But the second part is especially interesting. The commenter suggests that restoration is viewed as more of a boring administrative task that's better suited for AI. The implication here is that the creative fun tasks are better left to humans. In other words, AI can handle the tedious work, like a traffic jam, while humans can handle the scenic, creative aspects like driving through a beautiful landscape. But this raises an interesting question, I think. Who decides what's a creative task and what's not? Many people derive satisfaction and a sense of pride from tackling what some people think are mundane or administrative tasks elegantly and with expertise. For example, I'm really bad at math, and I will gladly let an accountant handle my taxes every year, but some accountants find beauty in balancing spreadsheets. Similarly, some people find creativity in optimizing supply chains, or in a job like esthetician work, where people make other people feel beautiful one hair pluck at a time. So what's boring or administrative to one person can be exciting and creative to another. And I think the inverse logic applies, certainly in mixing. So what might seem like a creative fun task to one person, like setting up a complex effects chain, could be really boring to someone else. They might just prefer to tweak a preset from the Soundtoys FX rack and keep moving because they know the sound that's in their head and they don't want to fuss around. Now, let's move to the second comment, which goes something like this. Do you want AI to do your job? That's why music sounds like right now. People like this guy, he's referring to me, are why music is crap. Also, stop calling it AI. It's far from intelligent. This point of view is probably more common than the optimistic side of the AI conversation. Some people are wary or just unimpressed with AI's current capabilities, and I understand that. I've seen instances where AI is implemented poorly and traditional digital signal processing, DSP, could do the job just fine. On the other hand, I've also seen cases where AI completely outperforms traditional methods and solves problems in new and exciting ways that save everyone time. So this person's comment kind of got me thinking more about AI's role in the work of the mix engineer. Now, over the years, the work that goes into mixing a record hasn't really changed in a fundamental way. A mix engineer's work involves balancing and processing individual audio tracks in an effort to create a cohesive, polished final mix that enhances the emotional and sonic impact of a song while ensuring clarity, space, and dynamics. What has changed, I think, is that the amount of housekeeping work, administrative work that goes into mixing modern music has dramatically increased. Anyone can make decent music from home without the help of studio engineers or producers, which means more things, I think, need to be tuned, time corrected, and cleaned up, if not completely sample replaced. And all of that typically falls on the mix engineer. Track counts have gone up a lot too, as projects now have hundreds of tracks to deal with, especially at that pro-level mixing sphere where all those, elite mixers work. Think of all the tracks that need to be inspected for problems, tuned, tightened, time-aligned, tweaked, etc. Now, if the mix engineer is lucky to have an assistant, that work will inevitably fall on them. And that's a lot of non-creative housekeeping work for one person to do. So I obviously don't want AI to do my entire job, and it's an open question about whether or not it ever could. But there are tasks that to me are so tedious and administrative that I'd happily let AI handle them. In fact, it might even do a better job than I would, simply because I don't always enjoy those tasks. In fact, many don't enjoy the tasks that I'm going to lay out and would be happy if someone or something could deal with them so that they could focus on the more exciting and creative work in mixing, namely interpreting the emotional and artistic vision of the artist and or producer in such a way that delights the client and the end user or end listener. In short, here's my theory. The democratization of music production has shifted the focus of mix engineers from creative tasks to time-consuming technical fixes, and AI offers a way to restore the balance by automating routine work and freeing up space for creativity. So let's drill down. What are the tasks that I would love to outsource to AI? If I could wave a magic wand and have AI or a super intelligent DSP perform certain tasks for me, tasks that I could fully trust it to handle, what would they be? Now, some of them might be seen as administrative tasks, while others might see them as creative tasks. You might disagree or even be surprised by some of them, especially the ones near the end of this list. But in any case, here is my list. Many mix engineers, from small time all the way to pro, don't have the luxury of hiring an assistant to handle problems that can come up in a mix. Issues that can prevent a track from achieving professional quality. So I'm talking about things like vocal plosives, clicky bass tracks, guitar hum, buzz, HVAC or background noise, reverberant lead vocals, or drums with excessive bleed, audio dropouts, etc. This tedious housekeeping work is something that must be done before you can truly begin mixing. Now, while there are plenty of tools available to address these problems, they often require a multi-step process and some technical know-how. For example, many of these fixes are done offline in programs like iZotope RX or Spectral Layers, where you need to have pretty good understanding of how to use the software to get the best result. Now, iZotope offers some assistive tools, but they're not always foolproof, and even amateurs need to understand how to use the software properly if the assistant fails to deliver a satisfying result. Alternatively, you could apply real-time repair plugins directly in your DAW, or use something like the ARA protocol to tackle these issues. But all of this still takes time to set up and tweak and render until you're satisfied. In an ideal world, your DAW would be intelligent and would be able to automatically identify and fix these problems as soon as you import your tracks. So imagine if during the loading window, as you drag your files into your session, the DAW could analyze each track, identify issues like clicks, hum, or excessive reverb, tell you what it found, and then ask you if you'd like to remove all the problems or just some of them. Then, when you open up your session, all of these distractions would be gone, and you could focus solely on being creative and mixing the track. You wouldn't have to spend time hunting waveforms for clicks and pops or trying to repair them manually. And this is where AI, I think, could play a key role. I believe AI is ready to take over this tedious technical task, if it were seamlessly integrated into the DAW experience, that is. And the idea would be that AI could handle the housekeeping work without you having to leave the session, bounce the tracks, or load a bunch of plugins that are meant for more creative plugins. This would free up mental energy and allow you to dive in straight to the art of mixing. All that being said, I think there are some corrective housekeeping mixing tasks that I wouldn't want to leave to AI. For example, dealing with sibilance or reducing, even removing breaths is something that I feel requires a human touch. These tasks need careful attention to ensure that they don't end up being overprocessed, or worse, end up dehumanizing the vocal performance. So it's really important to strike the right balance, and I believe that's something that, for now, only a skilled engineer can truly manage. Tuning, sorry, but I think this is a job for AI. And I'm not talking about creative tuning like Antares' auto tune, where you can easily detect the key and just adjust the intensity and speed. That's fine. But I'm referring to the more transparent, I was never there kind of tuning, like what you do with Celemoni's Melodyne or similar programs. When you're doing this kind of manual tuning, The goal is to make adjustments so subtle that the client has no idea you've done extensive work on it. It requires a lot of splicing, splitting, tweaking, dragging, careful adjustments, and overall attention to detail to preserve the vocal's natural feel while making it sound polished and obviously in tune. This kind of work, not unlike iZotope RX, requires deep knowledge of the application to be successful, which is why most people farm out this task to an assistant, or they're forced to study the software so that they can tackle the work themselves. It's almost like being a miracle worker. The thing is, this kind of work is tedious, and honestly, not many people enjoy doing it. It's something that just has to be done though, especially as more people are making music without professional vocal training. So I think AI should be able to detect and correct the vocal toward the correct pitch, and I honestly welcome a helping robotic hand here myself. This next one is a bit niche, but it's crucial in mixing and involves a lot of detailed work like soloing tracks, checking phase, and inverting polarity of certain signals to ensure that you're getting proper low-end reinforcement and the best possible phase alignment between recorded tracks. Multi-mic'd recordings of instruments like drum kits are particularly prone to polarity issues. To fix these problems, you often need to solo individual tracks like the snare or the toms or whatever, and check the phase relationship between the tracks recorded with different microphones. And you can do this by using the phase switch commonly found on utility plugins. So when you solo tracks with different polarity orientations, you might notice that the combination of the two sounds off or out of phase. And inverting the polarity of one of the tracks can sometimes correct this and result in noticeable low-end reinforcement. This process, though, is really tedious, especially when you have multiple mics on a kit, but it's essential to getting the best sound possible from all the tracks. Even with a pro engineer at the tracking stage, this phase stuff can slip through the cracks, and phase issues need to be identified and corrected. And again, I believe this is another task that AI could handle. AI could automatically identify phase problems by analyzing the waveform and detecting when a peak is trending below the zero crossing, indicating a phase issue, and then flipping the polarity to correct it. This could be done across tracks where phase discrepancies are detected, especially for complex recordings, again, like a drum kit. If you've ever mixed a track that belongs to someone else, you probably encountered this scenario. You receive a bunch of tracks with cryptic names, and you have to listen to each one to figure out what the heck it actually is. Then you go in and change the titles to something that makes more sense to your brain, not to mention assigning a color to the track and then grouping similar instruments accordingly. So in an ideal world, AI could go through each track again during that ingestion process when you're bringing all your session files in, and instantly understand what the instrument is, classify it correctly, and alter the title accordingly, and also have the DAW remember how you color-coded the same instrument last time. So, for example, if you've always made your drums green, percussion purple, and so on, the DAW could automatically apply these colors to the tracks, making it easier for you to stay organized and focused. As the comments on my last video on the FabFilter Pro Q noted, EQ is, I agree, a highly creative process, but when it comes to detecting and removing resonance, I see this task more as a housekeeping thing and something that no random preset can truly address. Now, there are some plugins that address this, like Soothe, for example, but that's not exactly what I'm looking for here. What I want is an AI-driven EQ that can detect and suppress resonance, but also leave me with useful nodes for boosting desirable frequencies once those unwanted ones are dealt with. The closest thing I've seen to this is in iZotope's Neutron, where you can use a feature that highlights potential areas of harshness and settles the nodes over those regions. However, it's still up to you to make the manual subtractive adjustments. I'd like an AI tool that not just confidently settles those nodes over the regions, but also gently reduces said harsh frequencies and then leaves behind a bunch of nodes that I can use for additive creative boosts. This way, the creative side of EQing stays in my hands, but the tedious housekeeping aspects like removing resonance those are handled by AI. Now, this one might be controversial as it involves a lot of creative effort, but to me, vocal comping is just more of a housekeeping task, one that I think should be almost entirely handled by AI or some kind of intelligent processing. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, vocal comping involves going through every single take, lining them up, and listening to find the best moments in each, and then creating a new track from a composite of best takes. So the first part of the vocal might be perfect, but the second part doesn't work because it's off pitch or just not emotionally convincing. So you take the best version of the second part of another take, move it to a new track, and then add that first part of the first take, apply a crossfade, and then stitch them together to make it sound like one organic performance. Now, going back to something I said earlier about track count, think about the importance of vocals in modern pop production. You could easily end up with 25 to 100 takes of a single lead vocal that you have to sift through. The goal is to find the best parts and blend them together in a flawless performance as if the singer nailed it the first try. But let's be honest, that kind of vocal comping is a chore, and one I believe AI is ready to take over. Here's how I imagine it working. You feed all of the tracks from a set of vocal takes into the system, and the AI analyzes them to create a few comp options that prioritizes the take based on some user preferences. Say, I want you to draw from the best of the most on-pitch and dynamic performances. So any sections that are off-pitch or have wildly inconsistent volume levels would be ignored. You could then preview the results and use tools like auto-tuning or resonance removal and other fine-tuning features to polish the comp into something seamless. And like all of my other AI ideas, this would need to happen within the DAW and not outside of it, like something from Synco Arts, I think it's like Vocaline or whatever, or Isotope RX. And while some might say, hey, comping is available in most DAWs, it's not intelligent or terribly efficient. It's still a tedious process, and even DAWs like Logic Pro X could use some AI help here, I think. Okay, for those who aren't familiar with a fader mix, this is something that occurs after you've completed all those necessary repairs to the tracks, but before you start working with compressors, EQs, and reverbs. Now, the main goal of a fader mix is to establish a solid overall level balance of all the tracks in a way that creates a clear sonic hierarchy. Typically, the vocal will be the loudest element, followed by the drums, the guitars, synths, and maybe percussion or something else. And the idea is to ensure that everything has its place in the mix, creating a balanced foundation for the rest of the process. To achieve this manually, you bring up the tracks one by one, starting with the vocal at the loudest level, and then gradually raise all the other faders until you've achieved a well-balanced overall structure. Well, in my dream DAW scenario, it already knows where the vocals are, where the drums are. Imagine if it could take on this task on its own, and you could tell it, make the vocal the loudest thing, the drums next, the guitars next, and so on and so forth. That would be pretty cool. But also imagine a really smart DAW that also knew where the verses, choruses, and solos were located across your mix and could take that information into consideration too as it drew up its auto fader mix adjustments. Now, there is a tool that can assist with this task in a more intelligent way, and it's called iZotope's Mix Assistant, introduced in, I think, Neutron 3. However, the drawback of Mix Assistant, at least in the version that I've used, is that you have to play the track from start to finish. And then you got to manually label tracks and add stars to indicate which ones are important. It becomes a bit messy, especially with large track counts, and I found that the tagging process is cumbersome, and it leads to less than ideal results. While I don't see the fader mix as a particularly creative task, it is a crucial one, and I believe AI could take over this step, providing a solid starting point for the mix. Since tracks are recorded at different levels, I think an intelligent DAW could automatically adjust the fader levels based on the overall loudness of each track, and this way the faders could be set without the need for constant manual adjustment, letting you focus on more creative aspects like EQ, compression, and reverb, without the fader mix getting in the way. So earlier I mentioned correcting polarity issues, which involves flipping the polarity of a track to achieve low-end reinforcement. This is a common problem with drums, but another issue that often arises with drums is trying to ensure the phase is correct at a timing level. When the phase is off at the timing level between all elements of a drum kit, the sound can become thin or just downright strange. What I'd love to see is AI step in to address this. Imagine grouping all the drum tracks, maybe you do it or the computer does, and you tick a box that says the snare is the source of truth timing-wise. The AI could automatically adjust the timing of all the other drum tracks, like overheads, toms, cymbals, to lock them in phase with the snare, while also ensuring that everything aligns with the song's overall BPM. Normally, this involves manual work like Elastic Audio or Beat Detective or something in Pro Tools, or AutoAlign Pro, or there's even similar workflows in Melodyne. But what I'm envisioning is an AI-powered solution integrated directly into the DAW. This AI could identify and lock all the drum tracks and then make sure everything is perfectly in time with the grid based on either the BPM detected by AI or one that's input by the user when the session is going up. Okay, many EQs now feature unmasking tools like the FabFilter one that we talked about in the last video. And this is where they can identify masking between two tracks, which allows you to let's say, the vocal win in the 300 hertz range by automatically ducking 300 hertz from other competing tracks like the right-hand piano or guitar. Essentially, the plugin helps unmask frequencies, making different elements of the mix more distinct and easier to hear. However, what I haven't seen yet is unmasking detection paired with automatic peak reduction for specific tracks or even entire groups of tracks, all controlled by the mix engineer's input. So imagine being able to hit a microphone button on your computer. For me, it's the F5 key of my MacBook Pro, and then speak directly to the DAW and say something like, "Get anything masking my vocal in the mid-range out of the way." The AI, with all the tracks now talking to each other, would intelligently detect and subtract anything masking the vocal in that range, automatically adjusting the competing track elements from any track. This could even be extended further in a simple way, like ensuring that the bass wins against any competing low-end frequencies in other tracks. The AI would automatically unmask those frequencies to create clarity in the mix. In my mind, if masking can be detected, AI should be able to take the next step by automatically reducing or untangling competing frequencies. Of course, this would still require input from you, the engineer, as you would know what's best for the mix. The AI would handle the heavy lifting of unmasking and balancing frequencies based on your semantic instructions. Okay, so those are 9 tasks on my wish list that I would love AI to take over, allowing me to focus less on technical details like tuning, timing, pops and clicks, and more on being creative. I want to concentrate on realizing the creative vision of my client or myself, and ultimately, I want to help to evoke an emotion in the listener. Now, some people might argue that outsourcing these tasks to an intelligent assistant would be cheating, and that it was making mixing too easy, and that mixing maybe shouldn't be easy. It should be hard. I actually disagree with this. I disagree with the whole premise. Even if everything I mentioned above was taken care of by AI, mixing would still be hard, just less annoying. To me, mixing isn't about data entry and administrative tasks. And I know you don't think that either. It's actually about pleasing the client and bringing their creative vision to life, which means if you're successful, this creates an emotional connection with the listener. Clearing out clicks and tuning and drum aligning are all important tasks, but they're not things that the clients will necessarily rave about. They'll never listen to a finished mix and say, "Wow, Jeff, the way you got rid of those plosives on that background vocal gave me chills." That stuff is table stakes. Clients expect those issues to be handled by you or your assistant engineer. That stuff is easy. What's hard and requires creativity is shaping the emotional and artistic aspects of the track with things like automation, not AI automation, but automation, time-based effects, compression, and more. That's where true creativity comes in. And believe me, it's often very, very hard. interpreting the emotional and artistic vision of the artist and producer, making decisions that align with the song's creative direction and capturing the feel of the music is hard. Understanding the context of the music within its genre, historical significance, or even intended audience, and making adjustments based on these nuanced factors is hard. Balancing an overwhelming number of individual elements like vocals, instruments, and sound effects. Remember, we're not mastering with a 2-track, it's a bunch of them. While ensuring the overall cohesion of the mix and maintaining clarity is hard. And then when a draft of the mix is done, it's your job to translate abstract metaphorical mix notes into a vision that the client will like. That requires empathy and imagination, and I believe a human brain with no robot parts. And that's where the mix engineer's focus should be, on all that creative work so that the song connects with the listener. So that's 9 things I want AI to take over and why it's not cheating if it does take over. So what do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Do you think that my 9 suggestions take too much away from the old school mix engineer and leave too little to really call it mixing still? I want to know. Let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching and hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.